So Charlie is bringing us apparitions today. You're taking this series of courses, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of well versed in apparitions, but
Mm.
uh, before we start, I think we ought to have somebody pray us in. What do you think?
Yes, of course.
Who would like to do it? Who's willing to step up and pretend they know God?
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Aw, thank you, Kevin.
Mother, Father, God, we come before you today with humble hearts and anticipation that you will bless Charles as he delivers a talk on apparitions and that you will expand our understanding and the impact of it in our lives on a daily basis and how we can inform others. We ask it all in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kevin. That was very nice of you. So the topic of apparitions is not new to me at all, but I did attend a seminar a week ago by Lloyd Auerbach, who has spent most of his adult life investigating the paranormal, afterlife, after death, and apparitions. He was a very good speaker. He was well prepared. I enjoyed going to the seminar. Um, we arrived there. I brought my dog and Dolly with us, and the first person we greet outside the room was a lady that just my dog Peaky. And guess what? She had a she had a dog named Peaky. What's the likelihood of that? To have another find somebody would have a dog at that meeting named Peaky. So anyway, there's such like I don't know what you call it, internal guidance system that works for all creation, and sometimes we get a glimpse at the serendipity of people coming together uh, for whatever reason. Okay, so what I wanted to do about apparitions is give you the kind of the definitions of what uh, Lloyd came up with. And he would say this: some experiences suggested of life after death, apparitions. You'd find it as a ghost or form of deceased persons are seen, which in range in appearances from filmy to completely lifelike. Then there's deathbed visitations. A dying person within 48 hours of death sees visions of deceased loved ones who seem to be beckoning them to join them. And then there's instrumental trance communications, calls it ITC. Unexplained sounds, voices, and images are received by a variety of electronic devices, including recording instruments, TVs, computers, radios, telephones. And then there's mental mediumship. A medium conveys information regarding a deceased person to the living. And then there's NDE, near death experiences, which clinically dead, he or she experienced some of, all of, several features, including out of body experience, a tunnel sighting deceased relative encountering a being of light, and life review. And then there's OOBE, which is out of body experiences. Persons experience their consciousness at a location away from their physical body. And then there's phone calls from the dead. deceased person voice is heard on the telephone. And then there's physical mediumships. In the presence of certain persons called physical mediums, materialization and the direct voice in the air seem separate from the medium are reported. Then there's poltergeists. Persons report a variety of effects, including raps, spontaneous movements of objects, touches, aromas. Occasionally, these effects are accompanied by apparitions. The apparitions are considered by some researchers as suggestion of life beyond death. Reincarnation cases. Individuals, usually children, describe details of a prior life. Spontaneous cases. Effects seem to relate to the deceased, which includes touches, aromas, sounds, sensations, falling paintings, and stopping of clocks. Then there's spiritual transformation experiences. Many types cause one to perceive him or herself in the world profoundly differently. So that's a lot of different labels we give to this, to the apparitions or to life after life. Now, I'm sure people that have lived as long as most of us have had some experiences similar to this. Who would like to share? Has anyone had any of these experiences that I rattled off here, the definitions of? Would you like to share those? Anybody? Laura, sure.
I used to go regularly to an NDE meeting once a month, and they would have a speaker every month, and it was really interesting because there was a common thread, and the common thread was a feeling of unconditional, overwhelming love, and they didn't want to.
Right.
They were told that they had to come back because it wasn't their time yet, but that was a common thread. Some of them would find themselves in a field of wildflowers or whatever. Another person, and we had her one time, and I could have her come back again sometime. Her name is Tina Angeli. She's had 3 near-death experiences, and one of them, she found herself in front of a table with 4 apparitions that look like monks with hoods over their heads. She couldn't see any faces, and she actually did a painting of them, of what she saw. It was quite interesting. But the one that I experienced myself was with another minister of ours. I don't know if she still is paying dues or not, but it was Helena Trey. She lost her husband suddenly in a motorcycle accident, and we've been friends forever. And I was going out to her house every day after he passed and doing Reiki with her. And she had a room set up in her home for Reiki. And so I was doing Reiki on her, and I started the head. And when I got down to her feet, in my mind, well, actually, I thought I saw her husband walk through the door and walk around us and come to her side and put his head on her chest. And she reached out her hand and put her hand on his shoulder. And when I finished, I asked her, I said, anything unusual happened today when I was doing Reiki? And she said, yes, Chris came into the room and he walked around you and he came to my side and he put his head on my chest. And I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. And I was like, oh my God, we both saw the exact same thing.
That's awesome.
There was a picture on the wall that he had given her. She loves dragonflies. And that picture, after we talked about it, was upside down.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Charlie, you mentioned the talking about the deathbed quite a few years ago, and I think I was right around when I first met you, Laura. Anyway, I used to have a friend, and we did these paranormal investigations. So we did one at the Cheney Homestead in Manchester, and they had a dead bed in this house, and it's like an old antique bed, and it has a tray underneath it where they used to put the dry ice. So I had my girlfriend's video camera set up on a tripod, and I looked at her and I said, I'm going to go lay on the bed. And she goes, What are you, nuts? That's just for dead people. And I'm like, Yeah, well, I just want to lay on it for a minute. And so I did. I laid on the bed. Well, after we got home and we re-looked at the video, we were asking questions if there was anyone in the room with us. And right after I lay down on the bed, right above my foot was a tiny red beam of, it looked like a laser light. And it moved extremely slowly from my foot, and it went all the way to my head, and it blinked, and then it disappeared.
Amazing.
And
Huh? Wow.
that was pretty awesome. And then we also got a video of asking questions if someone was with us, and a man's voice, very garbled, and it sounded very much like him saying, "The only one." And that's the first time that I've ever really gotten
Wow.
a good wording like that, where you could really understand what they're saying. So that was kind of a cool experience. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate, some of these things that are amazing, that are unexplainable. Sometimes
Mhm.
we don't even talk about them because we're
People
embarrassed.
think they're nuts. I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I encourage that. I encourage, the more we understand about life, the experiences, I
Hmm.
encourage people to talk about them.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Well, 50 years of doing hospice work, there will never be anybody walking this earth that will ever be able to convince me that there isn't something after for what I've experienced with dying people. That's all I have to say on that.
Me too.
Yeah.
I've had hospice patients that have reached up
Hmm.
for someone's hand. Or
Hmm.
I've had hospice patients that called out a name.
Hmm.
A friend of mine that was passing, she saw her father in the curtains.
Hmm.
And I know for a fact that someone always comes for you.
Yes, that's very true.
Always.
Yeah.
You never cross over alone, but
Hmm.
someone always comes for you. Good
So,
evening.
Kevin, as a funeral director, did you ever have any unique experiences? You're muted. Still muted.
I used to dream about the deceased as I was dealing with the funeralization process.
Yeah.
I would dream about the deceased
Hmm.
and communicate with them to a certain extent, and sense individual family members that needed extra attention. And one case was a man came to me that had been in a motorcycle accident, and the last thing his 12-year-old son had said to him is, "I hate you." And
Oh,
the father drove off on his motorcycle and died in a car accident.
oh dear.
So and the man came to me, and I understood the situation. And then the family came in to make further arrangements. And during the arrangements, it was brought up about this son. So I was able to deal with the family and point them in the right direction, as in
Mhm.
how to deal with that son. and make
Right.
sure that that son minimized his guilt.
Right.
And that happened on more than one occasion. Uh, but a question I have, are apparitions just visual?
Are they what?
Just visual.
Hmm. Uh, okay, that brings up another. Yeah, so in the definition we went through here, some people can smell, some people can intuitively feel. All the senses are available to express our feelings of relating to somebody that's passed over, somebody's about to pass over. Uh, there's so much information today about near-death experiences and all that. It's so having the advantage of living 90 plus years. I've seen the growth of things, of experiences, of expanded consciousness. I mean, one example of that is be like in the early 70s, I was doing yoga on, on public broadcasting, which brought it into the States. But yoga was an old practice that we weren't using in the States. But now today, when you look at, 60 years, 50 years later, it's very prominent that yoga is practiced. And the same thing is true of almost anything. Meditation was fairly new. It frightened people that didn't understand it. It's the work of the devil or whatever. They would come out of their cultural beliefs. So the expansion of consciousness during my lifetime has been incredible. Just when you go to war with Vietnamese and then they come and live with you, and before you know it, you're eating Vietnamese food for the first time. So we're in a definite period of expansion of consciousness, which is definitely includes life after life. Um, anyway, anyone else like to share? Yeah, Melody.
Kevin, I'd like to try to answer your question as well, if that's okay.
Sure.
In my experience, I use the word apparition to describe when I see, um, I'll call it the physical form of how that entity, human spirit looked when they were in human form, like they're wearing a coat, you see their body as it was, or maybe a younger version. But your psychic abilities, I'll just use that word, or superhuman, that we all have abilities, might not perceive the visual so much or see an apparition, but you're able to smell them, or that energy doesn't have, I want to say, the vibrational frequency or strength to give off full apparition, full smell, full hear, or your auric field be able to receive all that information. So the two of you will communicate in the way to each of your both abilities are to receive that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe you'll get visuals in your mind, but not see the full apparition entity in front of you, but you can see it in your head. You're like, I know there's somebody there and they wear a blue shirt all the time. You just know it. You see it. I can see, you can feel it. I could feel the texture, but I don't physically see the apparition. But because you see it in here. There's like different ways of perceiving that frequency and that information from them and from you and your superhuman abilities, in my experience, anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Melody. The actual
Yeah,
definition that Lloyd Auerbach provided for apparitions is a supernatural thing, typically a ghost, phantom, specter that appears suddenly or unexpectedly. It refers to an immaterial figure that seems real or a striking, unusual sight. Common examples include apparitions of ghosts. Now, one thing I went there deliberately because I wanted to know more about the apparitions of Mother Mary. So during the questioning period, I brought that up. I said, have you studied the apparitions of Mother Mary? Because they've been an important element in my life. He said, no, we don't. We don't touch any God stuff. He doesn't want to dwell in what he was calling God stuff. When I looked at that, I was saying to myself, it's all God stuff, for God's sakes.
Right,
So, but
right,
he draws a line somewhere. And apparitions, can be scary, especially for the first time somebody receives something they don't understand.
right.
Yeah. The the benefit of living as long as I have, I've had so many different experiences um, that indicate to me that it's all there. It's all possible. I I don't doubt another person's experience because I've had so many unique experiences myself. Um,
Right.
where so many of us that haven't had those experiences come from a shut mind where, oh my God, how could you believe that, right? Oh, they can't reconcile it because they haven't opened up to that kind of experience, so their minds are closed.
Right.
But anyway,
Well,
um, uh,
I had a very interesting experience back in the 90s when my father passed away. Him and I had a very toxic relationship in the last few years of his life. He was an alcoholic, and he did some really bizarre things, and so we weren't even really talking much the last year or so that he was alive. But after he passed, he maybe it was about a year after he passed. I was in my basement doing laundry, and on one side of the basement where I kept all of my Christmas stuff, my decorations and everything, and on the other side was the washer and dryer, and there was this big cabinet where I kept like rags and cleaning stuff and things like that, tools. And I'm doing laundry, and all of a sudden I went to reach for something on the shelf, and something red caught my eye, and so I looked over and I pulled it out, and it was a Christmas card, and I have no idea how it got there, and I've never seen it before, and it was from my father,
Oh my
and
God.
it was signed, "I love you, Dad." I never heard those words from my father in my entire life.
Wow.
And he loved cats, and there were cats on the front of the card. It was a
Oh,
Christmas card. I still
yeah,
have it. I still have the card.
thank you for sharing that. In the ministry here, one of the offerings we have for weddings is called the rose ceremony.
Oh,
yeah.
there's a kitty card.
Are you familiar with the rose ceremony that we use in our ceremonies?
The rose in the vessel. That
Yeah,
one.
the rose ceremony is designed to help people that aren't able to verbalize they love one another. So it symbolizes, so sometimes it's difficult, especially if you think the other person doesn't like you or something. It's difficult, especially for men sometimes, to acknowledge they love you.
Can you,
And
for the sake of the recording, talk about the rose ceremony?
can you speak about the recording about the rose? Oh, it's rose ceremony. Yes. So during the ceremony, we would have with person would present the rose to their loved one, and the idea was it's a way of saying I love you, but you realize that the rose has thorns, and in relationships you can get pricked or you can get hurt. And the rose has such a beautiful fragrance. Even if somebody steps on the rose, the fragrance is beautiful. Fragrance is going to come from it. So the notion is that in a relationship, when you find yourself stuck and you bring a rose and put it in front of your significant other and let the rose speak on your behalf, saying it's another way of saying I love you, even though I might have been hurt by you, or I might have hurt you, or whatever.
Mhm.
It's anyway. We have it, I'm sure, saved somewhere that we utilize it in a number of our wedding ceremonies after the pronouncing man and wife. Then it's a beautiful way of being
Yeah.
able to communicate, right?
Speaking of roses, Charlie, another story, and Sally and Paula can confirm this story. When we were in a women's circle at Sally's, and this other woman, I forget her name, but we were talking about stuff like this, and she said, well, she said, let me tell you a very interesting story. My husband passed a year ago, and every year on my birthday, he gave me yellow roses because that was my favorite color, was yellow roses. And so on my first birthday without him, my friends threw me a party so I wouldn't be alone. And we were standing around the room ready to cut the cake. And all of a sudden, between me and my friend next to me, we felt this like swoosh behind us. And we turned around and looked, and on the floor was a yellow plastic rose. And she
Wow.
said, I've never had a plastic rose in my house in my life.
Wow.
Explain that.
That's funny.
Materialized and materialized. Wow. Okay, how about you, Carrie? Anything you'd like to share? Like that experience on the beach where we were walking on the beach at one of our meetings and you ran into this man that was dying. Remember that?
Yep.
That
Yep.
was the serendipity of that was incredible.
Yeah. Actually, Charlie, he and his wife called me about not quite a year ago, and it's been 5 years or so. He's still alive.
Hmm.
And that was interesting. That was very interesting. But it's so my grandparents were undertakers, and their funeral home was in the place they lived. So the funeral home was in the basement. The showing room was on the first floor, and they lived on the second floor. So when I was a little kid, there was always a body around, and so I part of my ease with spirit is I've always been around them, from the time I was little. But I've got Charlie. When I was, I've had full body apparitions happen, only once, and I still don't know what that was about. But I think that was to show that it was possible for that to happen. I hear I'm very it's not clairaudience either. It is actual someone talking in my ear, and it'll wake me up at night, and the dogs sleep with me. And if the dogs don't react, then I know it wasn't something coming to get me. That's the only thing. So as soon as I hear this and it wakes me up, I look, and if the dogs are still sleeping, I'm like, cool. So I know what it was. But I think that all of us, each of us in our lives are constantly reminded that there is a life after death if we choose to see it.
Right.
Excuse me. Um, and as a medium, the spirits, when I ask about the way that they passed, it's most of them don't want to talk about that because that's not the important thing to them. What's important to them is they'll tell me who came and got them. They'll tell me who escorted them from this life to the next. And that's a piece of evidence. Some of them will talk about their passing, but it's more important who came to get them. Um, and, as we try to, I learn little pieces doing readings. I learn little pieces about the afterlife from the people who are living it. Although they're not as forthcoming as I would wish. And I'm not sure why that is. But I think that spirit is very, very intelligent and they relate to us in a way that we can understand. If we're someone who's going to be scared by full body apparitions, they're not going to show up. They're not going to scare us because it goes against what they're trying to do. But if you're somebody who hears knockings, rappings, and the dogs do respond to those, but in this house I live in now, there are rappings, knockings that the dogs will respond to. And for me, it's pretty much unlimited, and I get a little perturbed when I'll set something down and I credit it to old age, but a lot of times I'm thinking it's just a spirit, but I'll set something down, go to get it, and it won't be there. And then I'll go looking for it, come back, and it'll be there. It's like I think this happens to us all the time, but we out of fear or ignorance choose not to believe it. And I really believe the veil is thinning. The veil between the worlds has been getting continually thinner, I think, since about the 1800s when spiritualism first showed up. I think it was very thin then, and people started to counterfeit spiritual encounters, so they stopped. And now I think they're starting up again because we have so many other ways of counterfeiting things and so many people who believe. But the truth about the Marian apparitions, I think it has to do with that, Charlie, as you know, it has to do with the message, one, and who is going to receive it. And she appears to children. And she appears to children because they're open to spirit. They're open to seeing her. And the message is always pretty dire, like pray the rosary or there'll be a World War III. And I think we might be experiencing that a little bit now. And I would suggest if you have a rosary that you pull it out and maybe start praying it, because supposedly that was one of the messages she gave to the children at Fatima, was pray the rosary. There's a World War III coming. And apparently enough people prayed and it went away. At least that's one theory. So the things that we think about death, we fear death and we think it's the most horrible thing that could happen to someone. The people who have experienced it don't feel that way. And if you were to change our culture, you would have to change all of the movies where there's like a horrible death, all of the murder shows where people are investigating these horrible deaths and all the feelings around that. And pretty much what spirit has been very clear to me is that you take a breath in this life and you breathe out in the next life. And it is just that simple, just one step to another. And I think that some of the apparitions, some of the things that we see, some of the things that we hear, they're coming from us. The only way that we can get to ourselves sometimes is to jolt ourselves. And so will make us hear something that's not there. It's like our higher self saying, get a grip, come listen to me. And so I think that the more attuned you are, as Kevin will probably attest to this as a funeral director, the more attuned you are to spirit, the more you encounter spirit, and the more it doesn't faze you. I don't like dead bodies. I could never do it. I could never be an undertaker. But I do like spirit. And so And I try to be as open as possible to some of the magnificent things that spirit does for us. Like the people who will say, you know, I see a dime. I see a dime on the ground all the time. I never saw a dime before my son died, and now I see dimes everywhere, and I know he's leaving them for me. Cardinals is another one. You know, I never saw a cardinal until so and so died, and now I see them everywhere. I really do think that spirit is communicating with us, and it's up to us to get the message. And sometimes they have to use a telephone because we're not listening. And sometimes they have to make scary things happen so that we take notice. And sometimes they, you know, the movies and things that we watch that scare us, interesting though they may be, I think in many ways they are the underground, or whatever you want to call it, attempt to keep us from spirit, to keep us scared of spirit, to keep us thinking that there's a demon involved in every spiritual apparition. And so I think I agree with Melody. You don't always see spirit, but sometimes those internal, that internal gyroscope, or that internal, it's like pressing find on your phone, you know, to when you're looking for your earphones. It's like there's almost like a signal that goes out, and they respond to it when you need them most. I mean, I can tell you story after story in my life alone about how stuff has just materialized, and I knew that it was not anything that had anything to do with anything that I did. You know, it was all serendipitous. Even the things I didn't like, you know, a lot of things had to conspire to make those things happen in order to bring them into my life. And so, to me, Charlie, your subject matter is just awe-inspiring because, you know, spirit, one of the things that spirit tells me also is that they don't want to be forgotten. They don't want their lives to be forgotten, knowing that fully well, you know, at some point they will be, but they don't want to be forgotten among the people that they lived with. And so every time that we think of them, every time that we offer a prayer, every time that we, and that's the other thing, I don't want to take up all your time, but one thing that's becoming clear to me, you know, I was raised a Catholic, and Catholics believe very, very strongly in the fact that you pray for the dead, and that it's like your duty as a living person to pray for the dead because they need your prayers. And I always thought that that was like, why would that even be possible? Or why would that be necessary? But the more that I communicate with spirit, the more that I understand that prayer does help them. It helps them in so many ways. And it's not that you're actually helping them. It like gives them the confidence. It gives them the energy to do whatever it is they need to do in their lives. So, you know, I've had so many spirits tell me things like, when I read for someone, sometimes I'll see a party. They'll have spirit will be planning this party because there's going to be an anniversary or birthday or something coming up. And they celebrate everything with us. Even the smallest victories, spirit is having a part, you know, they say they're having a party, but they celebrate with us. They join with us as part of our lineage. And who was talking about the old ways of doing things, or the old beliefs? I believe that's why so many of the older ceremonies and the indigenous ceremonies all rely on the invitation of spirit, of the lineage, of heritage to come with us, because they so much want to be around us. They so much can help us if we just tune into them, and if we just allow them into our lives. And a lot of times there's some healing that needs to happen, and that can't happen unless you bring that spirit into your life. And that's why we do so much of it in meditation, and why we do it when we're journeying. But, you know, I would ask you just to consider, if you don't already do it, as you go to bed, as you say your prayers, just offer a prayer for all of those who have gone before you, who need your prayers. And one more thing before I conclude this long-winded, unplanned speech, but when my dad passed, we knew he was going. He had lung cancer and he knew he was going. And he passed, and I wasn't with him. I was living in a different state, and had actually airplane tickets to go and see him for his birthday, which was a week after he passed. And so I was driving in the car, and I'm not a very good griever. I get a little distracted, but I don't break down or anything because I never have. But anyway, so I was driving around at lunch. I just couldn't sit in my office any longer. And I was driving around the base at lunch. And all of a sudden he's like sitting next to me, in my mind. And he's like, I don't know. I don't know where I am. And this was the day after he passed. And I was like, well, don't worry about it. Who's around you? And he says, well, I don't really see anything. And I told him, I said, look, you'll be okay. What you need to do is just relax. And, Michael, the archangel, somebody's going to come with you. Someone will help you. And if you knew him, you would know his personality is one of like a bull in a china shop. So he wouldn't have waited for anyone to come and get it. He would have just forged on. And he had so many fears about dying. I think he was still partially on the earth. But anyway, those of you who remember Maitland, when she found out he died, she said, okay, I will send a Buddhist monk to watch over him. And I'm like, okay, great. So the next thing he says to me is, who's this Chinaman that keeps following me around? And I was like, Dad, he's there to help you. Stop. Just. So, I mean, that's kind of how I knew that the whole thing was coming full circle. And he said to me, I don't know how I'm talking to you. I said, well, it's all right. You can talk to me anytime you want. You need to figure this out for yourself. I'm not with you. I will, call on Michael, call on whatever. So he must have taken care of himself, because about a year later, I'm driving around again. And this time he comes to me, and he's in the desert. And he's like, the wind is blowing. I can see his hair, and he's trudging through the desert. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Just talking to him. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm trying to find, he was a recovered alcoholic. He wanted to help other alcoholics. He goes, I'm finding the lost alcoholics. I said, you don't. I'm like, what you're doing is you're lost in your thoughts. Can you please, you can find and help lost souls without having to go after them, right? You're in a different situation. He thought about that. He's like, oh, okay. But it's so funny, watching from his experience of, when you hear the spiritualists talk about like attracts like, and you go to that level to which you believe, and the level to which you vibrate with, was so apparent in his passing and the things that he taught me about it. I knew I was in communication with him because my sister called me up and she's like, I can't find his safety deposit key. And she was going insane. And I'm like, he told me where it was, and I told her, and then she wouldn't talk to me for a week because she called me a freak and said there's something wrong with me. And, but what I'm trying to say is, Spirit does need your prayers. He was one who could have used more prayers than I gave him at the time. And he's a classic example of what can happen when Spirit just gets lost, when they won't listen, or when they're so confused or scared. I think it's more an inside job with him, and I think it is with most people. Do you mind if I keep talking? I have one more thing to say. I don't want to
Go ahead.
take up all our time. So I did a thing with Monroe, which they call it lifelines. And with Monroe, you go to various focus levels in meditation, and supposedly there's a world where confused spirits are trapped, and you have to go, and their whole thing is you have to go and physically rescue them. And so, first of all, I like the meditations. I like the focus levels. I could do the focus levels, but I got to the supposed world where these supposed spirits were trapped. And I'm like, why would a God who is loving and caring allow people to be trapped in their death out of ignorance? Because there was like people who were supposedly hanging off of wood from the Titanic, still in the water, still suffering the cold all this time. I'm like, that's impossible. God would never let that happen, right? And you're supposed to go and rescue them and get their names and look them up and make sure that you've done this rescue. And I'm like, doesn't make sense to me. So it's supposedly we're in this world, and I said, Michael, there's a bunch of people here who could probably use you. You available? I imagined him coming down, and I just said, hey, everybody, Michael's here. Go with him. Everybody left. So, I think that in our efforts to boost our egos and to prove that we're actually making a difference and to, I don't even know what they were doing. It just really, the whole thing was kind of silly. But it did show that we in our minds we can create so much. We whether we go there or whether we create it, it doesn't matter. But I just thought I would throw that in because I wrote, I haven't heard from them. I wrote them. I'm like, what are we doing here? This is stupid, and I just went on. But they haven't written me back. So I'm probably in the, like, she doesn't fit file, but yeah. So, there's so much a part of us is spirit. So much a part of us connects with spirit every single night when we go to sleep, whether we recall it or not. And for us to just become aware of that is huge because we are so much better than those people who are unanchored, who don't have a spirit to hold us or to teach us, to keep us out of trouble, to give us impulses that we might follow. And so I guess that's all I want to say is that keep your eyes open, keep your mind open, and don't be so quick to dismiss those things that seem miraculous because they probably are, truthfully.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the Marys. Let me circle back to that just for a sec. I'm in a Power of Eight intention group. This is Lynn McTaggart's work. And so we're intending and we're meditating as a group on Iran and the war and how we might lighten up that load, etc. And the apparitions that came through for me was the Trinity of Marys. So Mother Mary, Mary's half-sister Mary, and Mary Magdalene came in, and this is Sunnis and Shiites, and it's like, that's weird. And I don't know if that was my bias bringing in what I knew as a healing force, or if that was something that was a little more back in the day when Caitlin's been sharing some things about the cover up of all the teachings of Mary, etc. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So I have one of my neighbors, pretty staunch Muslim, and I have Marys all over the house. And of course, they don't have images. And he brought his kids in, and he goes, "Oh, look, there's Mary," and he was showing his kids. So they have a very strong belief in Mary and Jesus, just like we do. They just choose to worship differently, is all. So I think that she was a big part of their faith and their belief system. So I think you cued right in.
And
Thank
I
you all.
have an
Go ahead,
example
Laura.
of an out of body experience. You talked about near death, but also out of body. At one of the near death experience meetings, this gentleman that happens to be a friend of mine, he's told his out of body experience, how he was driving his car and it was in the winter and it was very slippery out, lots of snow, some ice on the road, and he was driving along and he saw this car coming from the opposite direction and it was coming right at him, and there was nothing he could do to get out of the way of this car. He left his body and floated up above the car and watched the accident happen. And after the accident happened and everything was quiet, he came back down into his body. And one of the women at that meeting was a medium, and she said, yes, because they didn't want you to feel the impact. So you left your body to avoid feeling that impact. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, certainly is. Well, thank you all for doing the meeting for me. My intuition told me that if I asked questions, you guys would step up and do the job. So thank you very much. You're sharing, really, really, really. I have a list of at least 12 things that I've experienced that are very unique in my life. But I think we're running out of time. We can share them maybe next week or another time. But I want to tell you that there's so much information today available. We're in the information age on the internet about any of this life after life. And I was watching Dr. Raymond Moody, who's near death experiences. He was a neuroscientist and also a psychiatrist. So there's a number of really astute intellectual beings out there that have spent their life devoted to like near death experiences. And when Raymond Moody did this back in the 70s, before it was even
Popular.
just beginning to bubble up, he he did a research. He couldn't do it within his medical community because they weren't ready for it, but was able to send emails out to people that he'd found out had near death experiences. And he was able to glean a lot of information from them that was unique. So when he wrote a book about it, I'm sure you could all read it. But his point is today, and he's an old man today, he was saying that because the information now is brought forward, that we're increasingly aware of what near death is and all that, that you couldn't do the same research today that he did back in the 70s, because then it was virgin territory. So, but now it's all tainted by what we already understand. And Terry was interesting about when we cross over, it's so important that we surrender everything that we cherished. No matter what in life is that we cherish. We cherish relationships, we cherish money, we cherish blah, 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 music, whatever it was, we have to give it up. And if we don't, that creates the hellish experience. Life is painful in the transition. It's difficult. So it's an opportunity to learn to let go and let God. And that gets rid of, it makes the transition beautifully done. One thing I would like to say that was when I was putting together a lot of the interesting, unusual experiences that I've had that are very in different aspects of life after life. As I was finishing it up, I had 11 of them, and then Dolly comes back from visiting a friend and a former, she worked in a veterinary situation for many years with different people. And she visited a friend that was terminally ill yesterday. And she went with Pam, another friend that was also an employee at the time, and visited a lady that had brain surgery. And she's missing half her brain or something. So what Dolly brought back was amazing. She said the lady, even though she was missing half her brain, could remember Dolly's old telephone number perfectly,
Wow.
from years ago. But the amazing thing is, as everyone was chatting in the room, she was telling Dolly that she saw her husband who had passed. He was standing in the corner of the room. And So Dolly wasn't sure how to handle that because Dolly didn't see the apparition, but the woman certainly did. The woman who was getting ready to pass, and it's very common before people pass that they are visited. They have visitations by friends or relatives that are already passed, that prepares the people for passing. So the lady with the brain tumor wasn't frightened. She was prepared to pass. And so Dolly reacted very emotionally to, well, she'd go on because she was the only one that knew what the lady was saying, that her husband was in the corner of the room. Uh, anyway, it was amazing synchronicity that it was the 12th thing I put down on my list of apparitions. So thank you, Dolly, for coming home and sharing that with me.
For real.
It's
Very real.
It was very real for her. Dolly's in the background saying it was very real. So if you want to continue this another time, I've got about 11 other things that, from my own experience, that I could throw out there that you might relate to. Some of them I'm sure you would. Some of them might be unique for you. But I've had the benefit of so many different experiences that we would call supernatural, but there's no such thing as supernatural. What there is the continual awakening of the consciousness of humanity. And the more we're aware of things going on beyond our normal daily lives, I think that's growth. That's the growth of humanity and the consciousness. And regarding Nikki, yes, Mother Mary's apparitions, from what I've studied and when that are always to pray for peace, that war is imminent. If humanity doesn't change its ways, they're going to continually have wars. And so, as a divine mother, she'd rather see us live peacefully, encourages us to do that. And I've been to many of the apparition sites around the world, and probably the most prominent one that's still going on today was back in the 80s, like Terry was saying. She appeared to 6 children. Now, that was in the 80s, and some of the children are still alive, and how old are they now? From the 80s, they got to be 50, 60 years old. They're still around and still receiving apparitions, and people are still journeying to Medjugorje today to experience what's there. And certainly while I was there, they moved the apparitions from the hillside into the church because of the communist influence at the time was attracting too many people, too many pilgrims. So they decided it was safer to do it in the church. And when I was there, we did say the rosary, and we did a respect mocking or making a spectacle of the situation. That when the visionary received Mary coming into the church, I certainly felt the presence. I didn't see the presence, but that's another way of witnessing an experience is through our feeling nature. Well, anyway, time is up, and I appreciate all your sharing because it's all valuable. And that whoever watches these programs, it may be someday help them appreciate, some of the things that we're discussing. So thank you all for being here, and I really appreciate your sharing. It's all valuable.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm all in on continuing this. I think there's a lot more to be conversed about it, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, thank you.
I'll be glad to open up the subject matter again and throw some stuff out there that you can respond to.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Anybody
Nikki.
want to do a closing prayer? Brief? Terry?
Thank you. Mother, Father God, you've brought us together to contemplate spirit and our relationship to it. And we ask that you continue these lessons throughout the coming days so that something so wonderful happens to us that we can't miss it and that we know it comes from you. And so we are so grateful for all the opportunities and the experiences we've had to this point. We look forward to the next teaching. And we thank our speaker today, Charlie, for his words of wisdom and his experience of the subject and for opening our minds and hearts to spirit. We ask that those spirits who might be stranded, if there is such a thing, or those spirits who may be a little bit confused, we ask that they find their way and that you send your emissary, Michael, and all the other archangels and guardian angels to help these people who are looking for you and they're seeking peace in the next life. And so we ask that you grant them that and that you grant us peace in this life. And so it is.
Amen.
So it is. Thank you.
Very
Thank you,
good.
Terry.
Thanks,
God bless
everybody.
everybody.
Have a
All next
wonderful
week.
week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.